Diet culture is a system of beliefs that elevates thinness. It believes that everyone has control over their body size. It elevates certain foods and demonizes other foods. It has ideas about that moral value and status are linked to how you eat and the shape of your body. It's everywhere. These diets have kind of a bad rap. Now we have wellness. If this could happen in my house, it can happen anywhere.
Dear Family is a podcast hosted by Rachel Steinman, a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. And Rachel gets us up close and personal, so we feel a strong connection, familiarity, and comfort with her guests. So settle in and join us as we search for true healing and journey with Rachel and her most interesting guests.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dear Family, the podcast. I'm so happy to be with you again. It's kind of hard to believe that this is almost our 5-month mark since the pandemic. So I really hope that you're taking care of yourself and looking after your mental health and your loved one's mental health. It's so important. I also want to remind you, as a huge favor to me, to please subscribe and write those awesome 5-star reviews. It really helps me grow. So thanks for that. And also thanks for following me on all the social media platforms at Right Now Rachel. That's right with a W. Once you subscribe, you will not miss out on all the amazing upcoming interviews I have, like the one and only Dani Shapiro or Terry Cheney, 2 amazing women that are both New York Times bestsellers. So make sure to subscribe. Without further ado, here is Oona Hanson. Oona Hanson is a parent coach who has been in education for over 20 years. She supports parents of teens and tweens going through the rough stuff and the challenges of life. She's passionate about helping parents raise kids who have a healthy relationship with food and their body. Oona writes and gives talks on fostering body image, resilience, and lowering the risk for eating disorders. During the pandemic summer of 2020, she launched her Common Sense Camp, offering a framework for teaching kids essential life skills at home, like kitchen confidence, DIY, personal finance, laundry and cleaning, safety and emergency preparedness, being city savvy, social skills, and even anti-racism. Let's be honest, those are skills we all need. Oona holds a master's degree in educational psychology and a master's degree in English. Her work has been featured widely, including on CNN, Good Morning America, Good Day LA, Today, Grown and Flown, PopSugar, and Maria Shriver's Sunday Paper. She lives in Los Angeles with her husband and her 2 children, and I'm thrilled to welcome her today. Hi, Oona.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being on Dear Family. I reached out to you when I heard about your Common Sense Camp. I found out you are a parent coach and you counsel parents on diet culture. So today we're going to talk about 2 different wellness topics that have to do with our families. And they're totally different, but I love it. One, of course, is your Common Sense Camp that you started this summer as we're all sheltering at home with our kids. And the second is about parenting without diet culture. Let's start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your family.
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. So I started out my career as a classroom teacher. I taught English at the secondary level in independent schools. And then when I had my first child, who's now 17, I switched into more private tutoring and consulting. I actually worked on trying to start a school for about 4 years, learned a lot. We didn't open the school, but I think it was still a worthwhile endeavor. And I have a younger one who's 12. We are sheltering in place as a family. Luckily, my husband and I can both work from home, and the kids have been okay with online school. So we're doing okay. We have so much to be grateful for. There are still some hard moments. The fun part of the summer was making what was a family joke into a reality, and that was Common Sense Camp. So that's been an interesting journey, both as a family and then seeing how it's really caught the attention of a lot of other families who are looking for something positive to focus on this summer.
Where did you used to teach?
So in Los Angeles, I taught at Harvard Westlake School. And before that, I had taught in independent schools on the East Coast. And so a lot of my students I've gotten to know over the years, even since I've left the classroom, I've been from independent and public schools. Even before COVID, I was connecting with families all across the country by video conference and phone.
I love that you taught English. What grades did you teach?
I've taught 8th grade through 12th grade.
Okay, big
10th,
span.
yeah, a big fan. 10th grade is my favorite. I love sophomores. I just love that age group. I do miss the classroom and working with parents in a in-person setting. I also love because I love that classroom energy. Doing a parent education seminar in person, it lights my fire. I do miss that right now. I can't wait to get back to that. But in the meantime, it's nice to be able to have conversations like this using technology.
I love teaching. I'm a former kindergarten teacher who ended up substitute teaching all the grades. And there's nothing like the energy of a classroom. And I also have loved working with parents when I've done some seminars through NAMI. Once a teacher, always a teacher. Even though you and I aren't in the classroom, we're still educating others. Tell us how you became a parent coach and what is a parent coach?
That's a great question. I probably hadn't even heard the term until a few years ago. So I would say for the last, probably dozen years, I've loved being the kind of go-to person for my friends and then friends of friends. When people had any kind of question where they just weren't quite sure how to handle a challenging situation with their child, maybe a situation with a teacher, another student, a neighbor, changing schools, maybe a diagnosis of some kind. And I just always loved helping parents. Dentist's office and doctor's office waiting rooms. I've always started conversations with parents. It's kind of just something I've done for a long time. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that a friend of mine who's a women's business coach said, you're a parent coach. And I looked at her like, what does that even mean? I had an idea in my mind that it was someone telling you, how to be a parent. That's not what I do. So parent coaching can take a lot of different forms. The way I see it is I'm supporting parents to tap into their intuition, their instincts, their attunement with their child, drawing on the parents' existing strengths to help them get through a tough time. Because I think when we have a stressful situation with our kids, it's sometimes hard to see clearly when it's your own child, especially when they get into adolescence. I think parents have a lot of questions about what's normal, what's normal teen behavior. When should I be worried? And if I am worried, what do I do with that worry? Who do I call? Where do I go? How do I get started? And so as a parent coach, I really love helping families find the resources they need, whether it's a mental health professional or suggesting a class for their child, or if they're thinking, is this the right school for my kid? Helping them kind of assess that situation. I am on a parent's side. I'm a sounding board. I can give feedback, recommendations.
I love that. What did you get your master's in again?
There's an educational psychology.
There you go.
I also have a master's in English.
We all know we want our kids to be independent, and yet the adolescence is just continuing on. And that has to do with potentially us helicopter parenting, or the new term is the lawnmower parenting. And COVID has definitely not helped the situation. I can't just tell my daughter, okay, go take the metro downtown. I'll see you before dinner. There's none of that right now. So we are kind of in a quandary to push our kids to find that independence. And you, like so many parents, have noticed that your kids needed some practical life skills. The truth is, a lot of adults need these life skills too. And so you created this common sense camp with your husband. And since then, it's been featured on Good Morning America, CNN, Fox LA, Grown and Flown, which, by the way, I interviewed Lisa Heffernan. I absolutely adore her. And it was also in Maria Shriver's Sunday paper and PopSugar. So clearly people thought this is a brilliant idea. Why haven't we thought about this? And this is a perfect time. We're stuck at home with our kids. Let's give them some structure. Let's teach them some great values. How and why did you come up with this great concept?
It started out as a joke. My husband and I, over the years, had noticed our kids just not knowing how to do certain things that we thought were obvious, that they should have just intuitively picked up along the way from observing us. We would look at each other and say, oh my gosh, our kids need common sense camp. This spring, when it looked like, oh, summer camps are probably not happening, or at least not happening the way we would want them to be happening, we started just realizing that the summer would be a little different this year. So when we got the official announcements that their summer camps would be canceled, that kind of light bulb moment that, wow, we could actually do common sense camp for real, like actually make this a camp for our own kids. I love a theme and I love going all in on things. I had my teenager design t-shirts on custom ink. As we need to have as much camp fun as we can infuse at home. So we got s'mores supplies. I ordered lanyard thread and embroidery thread to make friendship bracelets. We've got water balloons. So we really wanted to try to kind of bring some of that camp spirit, even though our kids are stuck at home. We can't replace sleepaway camp. That is such a special experience, but we can still have some of those fun little touchstones. My husband and I sat down and thought we didn't want to pack the summer with a to-do list because that's not fun. We all need to have a little bit more freedom and flexibility in the summer. Kids need downtime, especially after the spring they've had where that Zoom fatigue was real. We picked up 8 themes we thought were really important for our kids. Some are really practical hands-on skills like laundry and cooking. Some are a little more kind of intellectual, like personal finance. And then some are more socially oriented, like social justice, anti-racism, along with social skills, not just ordinary manners, but some of those trickier social situations that our adolescents are likely to get into. How to say no, how to offer an apology, some of those trickier things that they really need to be taught. The kids were on board. The parental enthusiasm was clear. Like they knew they weren't going to get out of this. So, we forged ahead and I was so excited that I wanted to write about it. And then that just caught fire because so many other parents, I think, resonated with that desire to do something positive this summer. I don't want to blame parenting styles. Our culture sells a lot of things by telling parents that they're doing it wrong. I think our culture has a big effect on how we parent and, the college process and economic anxiety. There are so many forces at work here. Parents are always doing the best they can. We've kind of sacrificed a lot of things like household chores because we're trying to support our kids. They've got a lot of homework or they've got this competitive sports practice that's like an hour away and we're trying to support our kids and we think, oh, we'll get to those other skills eventually. But, I know so many families who have kids in college who told me, look, my kid went to college not knowing how to make a sandwich. Like, I don't want that to happen to my younger kid. So knowing that I have a child about to go off to college in a year, the clock is ticking. So it gave us that little pressure that we're like, okay, we really need to tackle this now. And then this pandemic summer, that's a way to make lemonade out of lemons. We can slow down and teach our kids how to cook. The nice thing is, as a parent, you realize, wow, a little bit of investment up front as a parent, as you can delegate more things to your kids, you actually can save time as a parent down the road. So now that my kids know how to, fold the towels the way I like them, they know how to make their own dinner if they need to. They know how to do certain things around the house. It helps the kids feel empowered and confident. And it also helps the parents just take that pressure off that you don't have to do it all yourself.
Love the idea of making t-shirts and having s'mores and making it themed and also having your older daughter be a junior counselor so that there were some responsibilities for her. You have since published an online resource for parents, which I'm going to link in the show notes, that they can purchase. This also doesn't have to be 8 straight weeks. It's flexible enough to fit into people's schedules. I'm going to read the topics. Week 1 is anti-racism. Week 2 is kitchen confidence. Week 3 is do-it-yourself DIY. Week 4, laundry and cleaning, major one that we all need. Week 5, safety and emergency preparedness. Week 6, personal finance. Week 7, city savvy. Week 8, social skills. These are all common sense things. What have parents been saying? Because I know that you have also a Facebook page.
I realized when I was creating the parent guide, I knew there's no way to make a one-size-fits-all curriculum. Every family situation is different. When you get the parent guide, you also get access to this private Facebook group where parents are able to help each other. Like, I have a child who's this many years old. We're trying to learn this. Does anyone have a good video for this particular topic? So it creates this really nice sense of community. I think the biggest thing that parents are realizing is how capable their kids really are. So I've had so many families have a lot of success with the Kitchen Confidence Week. Parents have been sharing great stories about, oh my gosh, our kids made dinner for the whole family. The kids feel awesome about themselves. And this is a time in their life where they would be, if they're adolescents, moving forward in their athletics or their academics or their performing arts, and they don't have all those outside things to show them how they're growing. This gives them a nice opportunity at home to realize, oh, I can learn and do new things that are really cool and authentic and valuable to my family. And this will last them their whole lives. My older one was thinking, gosh, when I have my own apartment someday with roommates, I'm going to know how to do all this stuff. It's going to be really valuable.
I'm very pleased. My older daughter is a great cook and great baker. She just loves it and finds a lot of value. And I always say that, like, that's one thing I know I can send you off to college and feel good about. My younger daughter, I need to work on that a bit. I think our kids need routine more than ever now that we're sheltering at home, so that they don't get lost down that rabbit hole of TikTok or Netflix or YouTube or video games. I know you just wrote about how family routines can help us get through the toughest back to school season now that our schools, or many of them, are going to be going back online. And you're not just talking about their individual routines, you're talking about family routines. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
I think there's a place for kind of mindless screen time, as long as they're not staying up all night doing it. I think a lot of us really benefit from a little bit of that kind of mindless distraction. That's one way to cope with chronic stress. If we can build in some other routines that are positive, we'll all feel a lot better, because the Netflix and the TikToks are fun and they're a distraction, but they're not as satisfying as the kind of connection and structure we're missing when we don't have our school and work routines. So I'll give you an example. When the pandemic first shut down the schools, I realized we needed to give some shape to our weeks and also something positive in our family. So Saturday mornings, I started making buttermilk pancakes. It's kind of like a little ritual. The kids now joke, I don't think we'll ever be able to have boxed pancakes again, because fresh buttermilk pancakes are so delicious. And of course, now my kids know how to make them, so we can do it as a family. But it's that thing that takes a little bit more time than microwaving the frozen waffle, which I do plenty of that too. But it was a nice thing that the kids looked forward to. And then
it's also a marker of time. Like, okay, it's Saturday.
Exactly.
Because right now time just feels very confusing in a way.
It's very disorienting when you don't know what day it is.
Yeah.
So I think building in those routines, like a Friday night family movie night, maybe you have dinner as a picnic on the floor in the living room. Building in some of those fun, out-of-the-box things, and you start to look forward to it. The kids know it's coming. They'll help hold you accountable. And it gives you that sense of structure. You know what day it is. And you feel a lot safer and more connected to each other as a family. And I think that really builds our resilience. There's going to be a lot that's not in our control over the next few months, maybe longer. And so having these positive things we can look forward to, it's really going to give us the best chance to get through this situation in one piece, because this is a lot of stress for families to handle. None of this is rocket science, but I think when you're fried as a parent, which I think we all are, it's helpful to see it kind of written down in black and white, which is why I wrote that essay. Our sleep routines, I put that number one in my list because I think it's the foundation of mental and physical health. I know a lot of kids and parents, you watch just one more episode. It's very tempting. And before you know it, it's 2 a.m. I think we have to put some boundaries on technology when it comes to sleep. If it's interfering with sleep, it has to be shifted to another time of day. I think parents also need to find ways of building self-care into their routine. A lot of our go-to were maybe things like getting a massage once in a while, or getting a manicure, or going out for drinks with friends. We can't do those things the same way anymore.
I miss all those things.
I miss all those things. It's an opportunity to find those things that don't cost anything, that you can do at home. So figuring out what it is for you. For some people, it's attending their weekly religious service over Zoom. It could be that on Friday night, you open the really nice bottle of wine with your spouse and you sit down and have a little mini date night for an hour while the kids, maybe that's when they're watching Netflix. So finding those little moments to work into your day or your week are really important. They don't have to cost money. It could be that you give yourself a a 20-minute siesta nap every day. And the kids know doors closed, mom's taking a rest, like she needs that. And you could tell your kids why you're doing it. I think that's another important piece of all this. One of my tips on the list is to make sure we make space for hard conversations with our families, to make that a regular part of our routine as a family, that we don't wait until someone has a complete meltdown to address difficult feelings. So telling our kids why we're doing self-care. Like, I had a really hard day at work. I need to go take a walk around the block and listen to my favorite songs.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, because as a mental health advocate, I do think it's so important for us to not underestimate the power of checking in with our kids. Our kids are struggling. They're missing their friends. This is hard on them. It's hard on us, but it's really hard on them. And so thank you for saying that. Maybe if someone's listening to this and they don't have younger kids at home, maybe that's scheduling a Zoom meal. Maybe it's scheduling a meal with your parents. I like the idea of routine, and I will definitely include your essay in my show notes so the listeners can read the other examples. We're going to shift gears. What is diet culture, and how do you see it in a larger view when it comes to well-being?
Diet culture, if you've never heard this term before, you might be scratching your head. So I'm glad you slowed down to have us talk about what diet culture is. So diet culture is a whole system of beliefs that can be sort of invisible. Anything that makes a culture, it's sort of the norms, the unsaid underlying beliefs, and even rituals. Have you ever had someone from another country spend time with you and they'll say, why do you do it this way? You say, this is just the way you do it. Or if you've been able to go to another country, you're sort of mystified at these beliefs or behaviors that are just second nature to someone in that culture. All of these things are culturally created. They're not just innate, natural beliefs. They're things that are formed over time in a culture. So diet culture is the same way. We're swimming in it. We live in diet culture. It's part of our American culture. It's part of Western culture. So you might not even know you've been in it, but I'm here to tell you you are. So diet culture is a system of beliefs that elevates thinness. Right? That thinness is the ideal. It believes that everyone has control over their body size. That's sort of one of the underlying myths that gets perpetuated in diet culture. It elevates certain foods and demonizes other foods. It has ideas about that moral value and status are linked to how you eat and the shape of your body. It's everywhere. If you are at the checkout at the grocery store, almost all of the magazines will talk about somebody who's gained or lost 100 pounds, these really dramatic photos. And they all say, if you buy this magazine, you're going to find out like the 7 secrets to getting your bikini body. It's well established in the research that diets don't actually work. Over 95% of people who go on some kind of plan to intentionally lose weight will gain that weight back within a few years. And 2/3 of those people will gain even more. Not only do diets not work in terms of their intended outcome, it actually backfires. And then we've known this for decades. And what's interesting in our culture right now is that because diets have kind of a bad rap, now we have wellness. The most famous diet company in the world, Weight Watchers. Full disclosure, I even went on Weight Watchers for a year once. So I'm not someone who's immune to these pressures and the seductive nature of all of this. So I get it. If you feel pressure to lose weight in our culture, it makes sense because our culture is telling us this constantly. Weight Watchers rebranded themselves as WW, Wellness That Works. Its new competitor called Noom, their biggest marketing strategy is to tell people they're not a diet. So it tells you how diets have kind of gotten a bad rap, but it's just being repackaged for us. Whether it's keto or paleo or clean eating or intermittent fasting, a lot of it is presented as offering you health benefits, but it's always sort of with a side promise of weight loss. What's really sneaky about all of this is that most efforts to lose weight actually are detrimental to your health. And so I think that's what's sort of surprising to people. Like, oh, I was just trying to be healthy, but instead I messed up my GI system, or I messed up my relationship with food, or I'm not sleeping as well, or I'm so irritable, I'm having horrible problems in my relationships. The list goes on. And when
Or
you
obsessing over food, like spending all the time just thinking about it, putting that mental energy.
Rachel, that brings up a great point, because that tiny percentage of people who are held up as the success story or long-term significant weight loss, almost all of those people have to devote a huge part of their life to maintaining that weight loss. I don't think that's what most of us want out of life. The other piece of all this is that if you do lose weight, because not everyone who goes on a diet even loses weight. Some of our bodies are really good at keeping us the size our body wants to be. But for people who do lose a lot of weight and then inevitably gain it back, that up and down, that weight cycling is actually very hard on our bodies. So it has a physical health impact. It raises your risk for cardiovascular problems, for diabetes. A lot of the illnesses that we associate with people in higher weights, a lot of that higher risk can be attributed to the higher rates of dieting. It can be very confusing. You're like, but my doctor told me I needed to lose weight. Well, doctors live in diet culture too, and a lot of the research that's been done on weight, it's influenced by all of this bias. We want to believe that if we just shrink people's bodies, they're going to be healthier. It's not that simple. So more and more doctors are starting to see the truth. A lot of these studies end at 6 months. They show that maybe their cholesterol went down or their blood pressure went down. They feel better. But if you follow up with those same people later, a lot of them have worse health problems from the dieting and the regain than if they had just never dieted in the first place. So there are ways of taking care of your health that have nothing to do with your weight. Exercise is really good for us. If you're exercising only with the goal of burning calories or trying to shape your body, it really takes the joy out of it. And you actually don't get all the health benefits necessarily. This is not an anti-health tirade that I'm on. It's actually looking at a more holistic view of health.
If I decide to take an exercise class or do one online at this point, if my mindset is, I'm doing this because I want to feel good and get my heart rate up, as opposed to I need to shape my abs and my butt and I want to look good in my jeans, the mental mind shift is going to be even healthier. And then I'm not going to be obsessing over how many calories. We kind of want to shift the way we look at what is good for us. And I really do appreciate you bringing that up.
And it's really hard. I mean,
it is hard. Yeah.
Really hard, especially, if a lot of your listeners are in Los Angeles, if they're in a profession that is based on how they look. If you have 1,000 dietitians, they're going to have their little pet things that they're really interested in or that they work on with people, but they will agree that you need enough food and you need variety. Right now, it's sugar and carbs are the bad guys, according to today's version of diet culture. When we were growing up, it was fat. Remember Snackwell's cookies?
Oh,
right?
Yeah. And that's all sugar.
You would eat the whole bag and be so unsatisfied. Whereas if you just had like a real cookie or two, you would have been satisfied, felt better, and you wouldn't have been craving cookies later because you had these delicious cookies already. It's really about finding that balance and tapping into your intuition. You're eating according to what your body is telling you. But it's hard if you've been living your life according to like what your Fitbit tells you or what the Weight Watchers point system is telling you. It can be really hard to get back to your intuition. And that's something that I think is worth working on.
I think it's also hard too, if you've been working out and maybe you are feeling great and somebody compliments you, that's more encouragement. My follow-up question is, should you ever compliment somebody on weight loss, or do you just ignore it? And if you do notice that they quote unquote look healthier, what do you say instead?
As a parent, I was very aware that I wanted to protect my kids from body image concerns. So I was very careful never to disparage my body or anyone else's body. And I gave myself gold stars for that. But I did compliment people on weight loss. I even complimented my child's pediatrician in front of my kids. We had a whole conversation about how she had a trainer now and she was on this new meal plan, because we're taught in our culture to comment on people's appearance. I don't do that anymore. I think it is very harmful. You don't know what caused someone's weight loss. So people lose weight because of illness, stress, grief, even just dieting to try to lose weight. That's stressful. It is hard to lose weight. And so I think that's part of why people want to praise it. If you had a friend who quit smoking, for instance, you would be like, oh my gosh, way to go. Congratulations. Because we've been taught to see weight loss and health as related. But the problem is, if you go back to those statistics, there's probably a 98% chance your friend isn't going to be able to maintain that weight loss. That's going to add to their sense of shame, their sense of failure. That people thought I looked better. So now does everyone think I look worse? It's telling someone they're more valuable in the smaller body. It's really good to start noticing our default responses. If you do see someone who has lost a significant amount of weight, and it's something where you feel like you have to comment, my new approach is to say to someone, you look really different. What's new with you? Or how are you doing? Or are you okay? We have an idea also of eating disorders as being this very extreme look and that it tends to affect a certain age group. But actually any age, any gender, middle-aged women are actually a very high risk group for eating disorders. Your friend who is posting about going to boot camp and doing this special shake diet, don't assume that an eating disorder is not part of the picture. You wouldn't tell someone with an eating disorder that they looked great. Since you don't know if someone is struggling with that, I think it's best not to compliment weight loss.
We had spoken before, and one of the things that I really appreciated that you brought up is that we often have this stereotype of what an eating disorder is. I know I did. I think of it as the young white girl who is type A and is restricting calories because she wants to look perfect and is that perfectionist kind of thing. And you let me know that actually people of color are more likely to have eating disorders. You explained how the theory is linked to racism and poverty because people can be food insecure. It can disrupt their relationship with food, or maybe they're hoarding. Another factor to consider, which goes against what I assumed that stereotype is that idealized thin white European body we see splashed all over magazines can cause, say, a curvy black girl to feel bad about herself and cause issues. You had mentioned microaggressions for people of color. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about why diet culture is racist.
This is a new concept for a lot of people. We're really going deep today. These are all topics that there are whole books written about, so I won't be able to do it complete justice. For someone who's interested in this, I highly recommend the book Fearing the Black Body by Dr. Sabrina Strings. She looks at the history of diet culture and the way it really took hold, especially in America, during the slave trade. The thin ideal is relatively recent. There was a time when being a plumper was considered much healthier, more attractive.
And then you were going to live longer because you weren't going to die of starvation. And you were more likely to have babies. The goddess symbols were all plump women.
There was definitely an idealization of a curvier body for women and for men, having a extra layer of protection for whatever might come. During the slave trade, there was something developed called the Great Chain of Being. It literally ranked human beings based on arbitrary factors. White Northern European men were at the top. And as you went south geographically and as you went, into different parts, you went lower and lower down the chain. And in every case, women were below men. They idealized the thin white male picture, like a Scandinavian body type, this kind of puritanical approach. Don't have too many appetites, don't eat too much, don't want sex. Anything seen as pleasurable was seen as something proper Northern European white people didn't do. It fed into this idea that body type and behavior of a certain ideal was at the top. Anyone else who did it differently was less human, less valuable. This even came into play with things like phrenology, where there was the pseudoscience of measuring people's facial bones to determine their intelligence as part of justifying enslaving human beings. It came into play in America in particular because of these fears about appetites. Research the history of the graham cracker. That could be a whole other, book in itself. There were just a lot of interesting ideas that were tied up in certain Christian groups about don't indulge the body. The body was supposed to be purified all the time. Even today, it tends to perpetuate racism and inequality because, for instance, the BMI chart, which was never designed to be a measurement for individual health. It was designed by a statistician who was an astronomer who wanted to look at whole population levels, like are there differences based on where your ancestors came from in terms of your height and weight. It was never designed to be an individual health measurement, but now when we go to the doctor, you're told where you are in the BMI chart. The problem is it doesn't actually tell you much about your health. But what's interesting is that there are racial and gender differences on BMI. And the problem is that people of color often tend to be in a different part of the BMI chart and are told that they're unhealthy or given less access to certain kinds of treatments because everything gets blamed on BMI when in fact there could be other issues going on. So again, idealizing a certain body, if you think about how that kind of carries through our culture, that's part of where we are today. The fact that we have to say Black Lives Matter, there are messages in our world that people have received that still wants to rank people by how their body looks. Those are the vestiges of ideas from centuries ago. The other piece is that, diet culture tends to have very class-oriented thinking. So demonizing certain food as junk or demonizing convenience foods. Not everyone has time to prepare organic vegetables from scratch every night.
Or can afford it.
Who can afford it or have the time.
Speaking of the Black curvy body, we looked at somebody like Lizzo, and I know me personally, I was so grateful to see this image of this woman who was so comfortable with her body. But then we also talked about how she felt the need on Instagram to show everyone how she was still exercising and working out. And then there's Rebel Wilson, who is talking about how this is her year of quote unquote health. And we see how she's lost weight. You mentioned the importance of discussing celebrity with our kids when it comes to diet culture. My youngest daughter, her biggest idol is Adele. There is no denying that you can't help but notice that she has lost a lot of weight. Do I even bring that up with her? Or do I just go about the day without even mentioning it?
I wrote a piece catalyzed by the Adele sort of makeover, all the attention she got for this sort of glow up, as everyone was calling it. I think it is important to talk about, but I think we want to do a lot of listening. I think asking our kids things like, why do you think it got so much attention when this celebrity who was known not only for this incredible talent, but first of all, why did everyone talk about her body in the first place before? Somehow her body was up for public discussion. But then when she lost all this weight, there was just this media frenzy. COVID news took over, but for a few days, it was the main headline, considered news. Asking kids why they think that gets so much attention. If they're not sure, we can start asking questions like, what are the messages about what bodies are valued in our culture? There's used to be this saying, inside every fat person is a thin person trying to get out. And that's just so damaging. People our age probably remember Oprah Winfrey wheeling out the wagon of fat when she had gone on a liquid diet for several months. That was like one of the highest rated episodes of her show. Think about the amazing things that Oprah has done in her career. And yet for a while, this was the thing that everyone talked about. Why?
And I'm a huge Oprah lover, but isn't she also the spokesperson for Weight Watchers?
Right.
That's one thing I wish she would walk away from.
I as well. It shows you how powerful diet culture is, that even Oprah Winfrey still feels pressure to be always trying to change her body and to sell this idea that you'll somehow live your best life if you just follow her plan. I never would have done Weight Watchers, except when Oprah got involved, it had this sort of glow that I was going to do something good for my soul and I was prioritizing myself. Sometimes when people lose weight, they might feel better physically because maybe they're getting a little more activity. Maybe they're taking time to prepare foods. But there's also that cultural reinforcement. You mentioned like they're probably getting a lot of compliments. To accomplish a goal, it feels really good and it can feel good in your body. Even if the goal had nothing to do with your body, but you just can feel it in your bones. The problem is it's not sustainable. When we think about someone losing weight and feeling better and they feel healthier, that's legitimate. You might actually feel better for a while, but it's the maintaining part where you're not going to be able to maintain that without really sacrificing a lot of things in your life, including parts of your health.
Oona, you have your master's in educational psychology, and I know that you especially love the adolescence period and teens and tweens, and yet you had a child who developed an eating disorder when you thought you were doing everything right. You never commented on their body image. And your child had severe restrictive anorexia, and there was some compulsive exercise. Your child was hiding food. One of the things that you realized is that no teenager should ever be losing weight. So how did this happen in your home when you are clearly so aware? I know that you needed to look at your own internalized beliefs. So can you just tell the listeners a little bit about how it happened?
If this could happen in my house, it can happen anywhere. I want to start off by saying parents don't cause eating disorders, but parents can be protective factors in lowering the risk. And also parents can be a really important part of helping a child recover. There used to be an old myth that controlling parents cause eating disorders and that to treat the child, you should remove the child. But similar to the books written that said autism was caused by cold mothers. We have
same with schizophrenia.
We are learning that science isn't always unbiased. There are certain scientific things that are very clear, but there are certain things where we have more questions than answers. So this does have a history to it that I think is important for people to know because it influences the way our culture thinks about eating disorders. We have this myth that it's always a certain type of person, as you mentioned, when eating disorders can affect anyone, any body size, any race, any gender, any age. In our house, this was not something on my radar. I had a child who wanted to eat healthier, which in our culture seems like a great thing. We're encouraged to do this left and right. And vegetarianism came in. And I thought, well, teens try on different identities. This is normal. I don't want to make a big deal about it because I don't want to cause an eating disorder. So it's like I knew just enough to be dangerous back then. Vegetarianism then became veganism. There were things we didn't know, like breakfast and lunch were being thrown out, claims of having eaten a big snack after a swim practice, and so they weren't hungry for dinner. The eating disorder is very powerful and it's very clever. It'll harness a kid's smarts to really trick you and manipulate you. We didn't realize how bad things were until they were really bad. And we did reach out to some people for advice because people have an idea of what an eating disorder looks like. No one else was concerned. People had noticed there was some weight loss, but it's like, oh, swim practice and this idea of losing your baby fat, that concept. People's bodies do change over the lifespan. So once we were understanding how bad things were and got diagnosis and started treatment, I threw myself into research, into eating disorders, into prevention, but also how to support recovery. Very quickly, I realized, oh my gosh, parents need information about this because the cultural myths and stereotypes, the after-school specials, those are reinforcing the myths that don't really hold up when you look at the data. It's really important for parents to know the truth about eating disorders, but also the ways that our culture and even the efforts to, let's say, eat healthier could actually lead a child to become extremely unhealthy. There's something called orthorexia, which is not in the DSM, but it might be soon. People who treat eating disorders often treat orthorexia, which is the unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. And this can really limit someone's life. I've met so many parents now whose child has developed an eating disorder. Almost every single one started out with an effort to eat healthier. Maybe a relative had a heart attack, or they learned something in school about how many grams of sugar they should have a day, or they're going to get diabetes. So kids can have black and white thinking when they hear certain things about health or nutrition. And if they have the genetic predisposition, they can very quickly develop an eating disorder. It's not what you see in the movies. It's something that affects the whole family. It is an extremely dangerous kind of illness. It's the most fatal mental illness, eating disorders. If you consider opioid addiction in the mental illness category, that is now a higher fatality rate. But it's very serious. And I think people think, oh, it's just like a diet gone too far, or they're just rebelling. No, those cultural myths, I think, are really harmful.
Thank you for sharing that, because your honesty about how someone like yourself, who is so conscientious, could still have a child, have an eating disorder, is again another reminder that we do need to educate ourselves and we do need to check in with our kids. I'm grateful that you are spreading that message and also have so much to offer to other parents. I ask these last two questions to all my guests. If you could write your 20-year-old self a love letter, a Dear Oona love letter, knowing what you've learned now, what advice would you give yourself?
I would definitely tell myself that trying to control or plan your life is just going to lead to more frustration and disappointment. To be open to the unexpected, never say never. Very few people follow one simple path throughout their life. Life is long and winding. Not to worry if you feel like you're behind or somehow not getting the next benchmark and the right time slot.
That's really good advice. Allow that road to unfold before us. Do you have any happiness habits? Is there anything that you do that brings you happiness and joy?
My usual go-to this time of year is Dodgers baseball, so I'm really missing that. Our abbreviated season might start soon, so there might be some surreal baseball being played in empty stadiums, so I'll probably take a look at that. I just like finding little bits of happiness in everyday moments. I don't have one ritual per se. I love that idea of just finding delight in the world, whether it's a car with a funny bumper sticker or you realize your coffee has made a funny little pattern on the table and it looks like a smiley face. I like finding those little unexpected moments, those little delightful, joyful moments that pop up if we're paying attention and we're open to them.
To me, that means like being present and using your senses and noticing things around you. You must have a lot of happiness moments. Where can the listeners find you? Of course, I'll have it all in the show notes.
Pretty much everything you can find is on my website, which is oonahanson.com.
Perfect.
And I also post a lot of articles and things on my Instagram, which is @Oona_Hansen. The Common Sense camp information is at commonsense.camp.
I wish you continued success. I look forward to meeting and hopefully finding happy faces in our coffees together.
Yes, I would love that.
Well, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me.
My pleasure.
Take care, Oona.
Yeah, you too, Rachel.
Bye.
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 This is Rachel Steinman. For more information or to contact me with any questions, comments, or guest ideas, please check out rightnowrachel.com. That's right with a W. Thank you so much for listening, subscribing, and sharing, dear family. And if you found value in what you've just heard, I would love and so appreciate a great review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, I wish you love, happiness, and good mental health.